Hello, my name is Ross Thomas, and I'm a community planner and geospatial analyst at Hill Studio. And today we're going to look at four properties in Lee County, and we're going to look at five different land characteristics. These include hillshade, which shows relative terrain and landform impressions; slope, which shows areas based on percent slope classifications; aspect, which shows the direction of slope for viewshed and solar potential analysis; flood hazard, which shows floodways and areas at risk of flooding; and then drainage/karst soil, which shows the likelihood of sinkholes based on soil drainage capacity. So the first property is located at 1167 Dr. Thomas Walker Road in Ewing, Virginia. And there's not really too much to show with the hillshed analysis other than that you can see that there aren't too many divots and bumps in this property, which means it's relatively flat. There are a few little hills, but you can see areas over here. You get a much darker impression of the land, which is going to be areas with a steeper slope, which will be shown on the next map. So as you can see, areas in green are places where slope is less than 15%. So it's a very small drastic angle. And basically, the entire property is majority green and less than 15% slope. But there are a little bit of yellow areas, which shows areas that's a little trickier for development, but the red areas are basically where it's unsuitable for development. As you can see, this property does not have much of that located on it. This next map shows the direction of the slope, which you can see on this northern end. Most of it is facing south and west, which is going to give you a lot of natural sunlight. And down here in the lower end of the property, it's mostly hills facing more the north direction. This map shows the floodways and chance of flooding on the property. So hash marks show places where it's going to regularly flood based on a nice, heavy rain, typical heavy rain that Lee County may see. Whereas the orange is actually going to show areas of 0.2% chance of flooding, which is about 1 in 500. So it's very, very less likely. This would be an extreme case. And then the blue is actually going to show areas that it's a little more higher chance, 1% chance, so 1 in 100. But still, it's not as likely to flood, unlike areas in the regular floodway where the stream lies. This map shows areas based on soil characteristics and how much drainage they have the capacity of. So areas that are yellow are going to be well drained and have low susceptibility for sinkholes, and areas that are blue are going to be areas where there could be more sinkhole and erosion. But there, as you can see, it's mostly in this top northern part of this property, and it's less likely that would be the case on a normal basis. Now, the next site is at 605 Maggie's Trail in Ewing, Virginia. As you can tell, it has this spine going through it with a ridge line, which can provide some incredible views and natural division between the houses. And then the next map is going to show slope, and as you can see, there is a pretty drastic slope at the eastern end of the property that would be less suitable for development, but the majority of the property is rolling hills, less than 15% slope, but there are a few steeper parts where you see this yellow and red, which would have to be dealt with. These are more of your vegetated areas anyway, and they would be less likely to end up being developed anyway. The third characteristic is, again, aspect. As you can see, majority of that ridge is going to be looking east. As you can see, this map is flipped, and this is north is here, east is here, so it's actually on a downward slope here. And then whereas majority of the property, it's really all over the map in terms of where the different hills face, but again, they are pretty not very drastic hills, other than this main one that you see going down the center. So it's a pretty even in terms of views and vantage points on this property. As you can see, none of this property is in a floodway or has any flood potential, which is great for development. This map shows a little bit better of that hillshade, kind of what the first map was showing. It just shows that there is that spine going up the center of the property, which could be great again for natural division amongst the properties. This almost entire property is covered in well-drained, low sinkhole susceptible soil, which is again great for development. The third property is located at 1057 Crockett Ridge Road in Rose Hill, Virginia. As you can see, there is this little hill here with the little bit of a decline on the southeastern end. And a majority of the slope is around the 15% mark. So it is a little bit more hilly than the previous two properties you've seen, with some areas that are very unlikely to be able to be susceptible for development. This area has actually been clear cut. So a lot of this is being graded to some degree in this area. It's a little more flat, but it's still could pose some risk for long-term development. And as you can see, a majority of it does face northwest. You have a ridge here, and this bottom half of the ridge is facing southeast, and this, as you're going down the hill this way, it's going to be facing northwest. Again, it's all to do with the amount of sunlight and views. This is a pretty wooded area, so it's less likely to do with woods and more to do with direct sunlight, which can actually impact the way the development ultimately is laid out. Again, this property has no flooding risk on it. It's a little bit higher elevation on rolling hills. And again, this property also has low susceptibility for sinkholes. So really the only challenge with this property is just the fact that it is on a steeper slope than some of the other ones. And this is the clear cutting that I was referring to a minute ago. The last property is located 819 Point of View Drive in Ewing, Virginia. Again, it's relatively flat from a lot of areas. You don't see a whole lot of major depressions on this landscape. And it's about a mile off the main road, Dr. Thomas Walker Highway, like the last one. And again, it's relatively flat. This area is going to be more wooded, but this area is mostly flat and free of any vegetation and just nice, beautiful pasture land. The slope is relatively flat. Pretty much the entire property, minus a few pockets, are less than 15% slope. So it's great for development, other than this, little entry area, access area right here, which you see a road coming down right here. And then in this area up here where a stream lies. Majority of this property, as you can see, is mostly red and orange and yellow. So it's mostly facing north and northeast. Again, it's more of a wooded area back on this property, like the last one. So it's matters a little less than the first two, which were right on the main road and very open. And then the last thing, there's just this one little potential area of flooding, which again is 1%, so 1 out of every 100 years. Very unlikely for it to flood, and this is on a stream anyway, so it's not really the area of focus for development anyway. As you can see from the hillshade from a second one, it is a very fairly flat piece of land. And then the last part is, again, this property is primarily well drained and has a low susceptibility of karst soil and sinkhole potential. So it's a very, very good property for potential development. And this is the wooded area I was referring to, with a lot of the flat areas and pasture land located on a majority of the property here. Thank you all for your time, and put any comments or feedback in the button, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.